All right, here we are. I'm Dino Verrelli, the host of Project Purple Sports, co-host, I should say, with Zach Gerstner today. I'm fortunate to have Cathy. I'm going to butcher your last name here, but I know you go by K-Fed, right?
CFED.
C-Fed. That's right. So how do you pronounce your last name, Cathy?
It's Federowicz.
So Federowicz, okay, who is the athletic director at Seymour High School, Project Purple this year, a new initiative here with Project Purple Sports. We've been focusing on high school sports, getting into the community with something special that we've done here. Second part of the basketball season is live stream the boys basketball season. So we wanted to bring Cathy here onto the podcast to talk a little bit about what she does and a little bit more about Seymour sports as a whole. So with that, Cathy, I'd love to kind of start with your background. It looks like you're in a classroom. I know before we hit record, you do teach, but for the audience watching and listening, share a little bit about yourself.
I have a kind of a unique background. I graduated from Seymour High School, grew up in Oxford. So I was one of those students who was lucky enough to come to Seymour. We didn't have a high school at Oxford at the time. I graduated, went on and was in business for about 12 years, but always had a passion for teaching and also for coaching. So after 12 years in business, I returned to teaching at Seymour when my kids were little and kind of went from there.
So did your kids go through Seymour?
My oldest two did go to Seymour. I actually taught my oldest son because at the time we only had one honors pre-calc class and I was teaching it. We didn't realize to the start of the year that he was in it. So that was a little tricky. And then my youngest son went a year at Seymour. And then by that time, Oxford High School was ready. And so then he transferred over to Oxford from sophomore year on.
Yeah, I think there's so many new people in this area. And I say this area meaning like the valley, right? Like this upper valley, I guess you consider the upper valley. Like you got Oxford, Beacon Falls, Seymour, which have seen tremendous growth over the last like 10 to 15 years. I mean, I moved to this area. Actually, my wife and I moved to Seymour now 20 years ago. It's kind of crazy to think about. It's actually 23. And then we spent 3 years in Seymour and then we moved to Beacon Falls. And I remember just the small anecdotal story here. Like I had roommates from college from Beacon Falls, which I now live in Beacon Falls, but they were part of that group, like back 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago, you had not only Oxford going to Seymour, but you had Beacon Falls.
Yeah.
And you had all these towns kind of use Seymour as that option. And over the years, Beacon Falls went in with Prospect and opened Region 16 and Woodland High School. And then Oxford, naturally, as you mentioned, they opened their own high school. So there was like this mass exodus of students leaving Seymour High School. So a lot's changed in the last 20 years. And a lot of people have come into the area. I don't think people realize, like, I think now you talk to people like, oh, they live in Oxford. My kid goes to Oxford, but, parents or maybe grandparents went to Seymour because there wasn't an Oxford High back then.
Correct. And just to talk about that briefly, when I was teaching when Beacon Falls and Oxford were all coming to Seymour, and a lot of people in the area, especially sports related, would comment, oh, either they favor the Seymour kids or the teachers, favor the Seymour kids. And it was the exact opposite. When you were in a classroom or when you were a coach, you didn't really know where that kid came from. And it was so awesome because, they all had their own little thing through middle school, and then they all kind of came together and all became really good friends from Beacon Falls and Seymour and from Oxford. And it was a really, I thought it was just a really special time for athletics, and all of our athletic programs flourished because of having all of those different communities come together and play for one school.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of doing that. And I think this area, I mean, I thought maybe a couple of years ago, I know there were some rumors that consolidation and combination of resources, which makes sense, right? But I think you look at some of the other towns, and we won't bring them up because we don't want any people getting upset.
Right.
But, there's other schools, and naturally, kind of there has been an ebb and flow in terms of enrollment, but we have seen I think consolidation makes a lot of sense. Let's just put it at that. And I think you thrive in that. And I know there's this notion of, well, if you consolidate, then the kids that are like on the cusp and you lose those kids, what happens to those kids? I think those kids still stay involved. They find other ways, and especially now, and we'll talk about this in a minute. With there's now so many other sports offerings, that are available, and in like lacrosse is a great one that I've seen. Just living up in this area, not a lot of schools have lacrosse, but now if you have the numbers, you can have sports like lacrosse or other sports, right?
Absolutely.
Pickleball is another one, which I'm going to go out on a limb here. I would imagine in the next 5 to 10 years, we probably will start to see pickleball, just like we've seen gaming, for
Right.
a lot of these schools bring on, like the CIAC is actually now, like, I believe they have like a gaming division
They do.
now
They
for
do.
student athletes. Fishing was another one that I saw over the last 5 years that became really popular. It kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit, again. And so I think consolidation is great. I think it's a great way to lower the cost when you spread that around multiple towns, and when these small towns don't have the numbers to support those types of infrastructures themselves. I think consolidation and sharing of resources is a great idea, and I think it benefits all the student athletes.
It does, and it gives more variety for the student to choose from. I get so many kids that come to me and say, why don't we have a boys volleyball team? And one of the big reasons is we're just too small of a school. And
Yeah.
if we were to send, another 30 athletes in that direction, then it's pulling from baseball and it's pulling from golf and it's pulling from outdoor track. So it would kind of hurt those other programs. And I don't know that we would have enough interest. Oxford has been one of the few teams in the area that has had a boys volleyball team. And this is the first year they're not going to offer boys volleyball because they just don't have enough kids. And yet I know Seymour kids that would love to jump on and be a part of that. But, then you'd have to talk about the whole co-op situation.
Correct.
And those could be tricky. The numbers have to work throughout the schools.
Yeah, that's a great example. And it's interesting, Cathy, as I look back, so, I'm now 30 plus years out of high school. Like I went to Notre Dame at Fairfield. We had a very strong hockey program. And now they're starting just to get that program back at Notre Dame. But like West Haven, for example, and hockey's another sport, right? There's some disadvantages, I think, to hockey because you need a rink, right? You need ice,
Right.
and that becomes very expensive. And here in Connecticut, there's just not an ice rink in every town, right? But there are certain sports, to your point, where we've seen co-op. And I was going here was like West Haven. I remember for years when I was growing up, West Haven had this dominant hockey program, and now they're co-op with like 3 different towns because
including us.
Yeah.
We are part of that West Haven. And you think West Haven had an ideal situation. They had their own rink right in their town, but they didn't have enough support from their student body to make their own team. So they reached out to Shelton, they reached out to Seymour, and they reached out to Oxford to put a co-op together. And we send right now 4 of our students are in that co-op program, but co-ops can only work for 2 years. Then the numbers have to be, evaluated again. And if West Haven were to get more of an interest, then the other schools would have to, we'd have to dissolve that co-op.
So fascinating. So I get a question that just popped up. Now you've taken over. Now is it co-athletic directors because you and Dave kind of split responsibilities? Is that right?
Yeah. So last year, Ernie DeStacy was the athletic director and I was the assistant. And so now I'm the athletic director and he is the assistant. So, and it worked out nice because with me coaching volleyball in the fall, he kind of took over that role to make sure that, we had all of our other sports covered. And now in the winter, while he's coaching, I can kind of, resume those responsibilities.
So as being the coach of the volleyball program, and you've been very successful there, Seymour's got a historic, strong program, and not only in this area, but in the state. Putting on the AD hat, as you said, this is your first, year or second year here, now being the athletic director. Are there similarities that you take from coaching to being the AD now?
Yeah, I mean, you always have that balance of the student, the athlete, and then the parent. And as a coach, you're always trying to make sure all of that works. And then at the AD level, it's just one more additional level. I mean, typically, if there's an issue with a particular team, we always try to have it resolved from the parent, the student, and then the coach. But now it just goes one extra layer. If that doesn't get resolved there, then it goes to the athletic director. But it is, it's always a balance for every sport, for every coach.
How's it been? I know from an athletic director's position, I mean, I know just from our interaction, I know there's interaction with the CIAC, right? So here in Connecticut, we not only you as a teacher report through the superintendent, which reports up to the Department of Ed, but then on the athletic side, there's like this, I guess, what will we call CIAC, like this unilateral organization here overseeing student athletes, but doesn't necessarily fall under the Department of Ed. It's kind of unilateral in itself. It's like its own entity, right?
Right.
So being that conduit between the CIAC and Seymour, and then also keeping in mind we've got the Department of Ed, because I always laugh because the Department of Ed is responsible for like education and grades, right? Like they determine curriculum, and that does flow down to the Board of Eds, but majority of the curriculum decisions are made by the Department of Ed. But then you have the CIAC here, which is kind of like this unilateral agency that is, I get, putting rules and regulations in play and how like athletics are done in the state of Connecticut.
And one of the things that CIAC requires is a state coaching certification for any coach, head, assistant, volunteer. And yet the courses that you can take are through the CIAC, but the actual certification is through the state of Connecticut. So, we have all of this and, CIAC is saying can't have anybody out there unless they're certified, but the certifications come from the state of Connecticut. And we have people that want to coach right now that still have their coaching certification tied up with the state, so it's kind of crazy that, that we have these three, pieces kind of trying to work together. And if we have complaints with the state because they're not pushing out the certifications and we go to CIAC, they say there's nothing they can do. So I don't know. It's just not a great complete system, I should say.
Yeah, this year has been an eye-opening experience for me personally. I have a son who plays at Woodland, and I had a son who ran at Woodland over the past couple of years, and I never really realized like the complexities of the CIAC until this year, until we got involved, right? And it was, like we have to go to the CIAC to get approval, and I was like, okay, but like it's approved under the Department of Ed, I would think, and then like to realize that it's like this own agency, this own identity, it kind of. And I'm not trying to bash the CIAC. I'm always trying to figuring out like the path of least resistance or the easiest way to get things done in the most efficient way. Do I think it's the most efficient way, the way that like the two don't talk to each other in some aspect? Like to your point, I know we ran into it with some of the streaming stuff and then, some of this stuff that we'll talk about here in a second as we move forward with the streaming. It's just very interesting to me. And then just from talking to other people just about the rules and the regulations and the landscapes and everything, it's just very complex, which most large organizations sometimes tend to be. So I guess we'll just chalk it up to that. I want to get back to something here, from the community standpoint, the time you've invested in coaching and teaching and now in this athletic director role, like, what do you think are some keys to success? And maybe for parents watching or listening here, that, raising student athletes or having that high quality experience as you get to college. Also want to start by saying, like, I think every parent, and we all fall victim to this, right? Like our kid's going to get the scholarship or our kid should be playing, but, let's take all that out because we just want to have positive experience for the student athletes in their high school experience in sports.
Yeah, I fell victim to it too. My kids going through and playing sports, you want them to be successful. you're hoping that maybe they would get the college scholarship. I think, being in a school system and you see the number of kids that actually do get college scholarships is so small that, you start to understand the process behind it. I will say my most successful teams, I've had parents who have supported their child and said, just, go out there, do your best, and basically have fun. And if that is the message that the parent is giving to the child, and that child is out there really for no other interest of just enjoying the sport that they play, we end up getting the most out of them. A lot of times there's a lot of pressures put on kids that, hey, you've got to get this scholarship, or you've got to, do these grades so that you can get this result. I think that's where a lot of times athletics doesn't become fun for kids anymore. And now as a grandparent and see my own son raising his kids, and they're still, 9, 10. But again, I'm always throwing that focus in there of, let's just make sure it's fun, right? Let's just make sure it's fun for the kids, because that's really what athletics is about, and you're going to get a tremendous from it in terms of dedication to the sport and, playing at a high level and a commitment and things like that. But the underlying aspect has to be that you're doing it because you enjoy doing it and nothing else, and Seymour is so fortunate that we have a great community that supports our athletes. And, they come out, they watch, they fund whatever they can to help out the community. And that's really what we want to get back to. And I did, I just over the weekend spoke with my husband, and this is a short-term goal for me because I am on the close end of retirement. But, I said to him, I really wish I had taken this position on 10 years ago, because I think it's going to be at least 5 years in terms of my goal of what I would like to see Seymour Athletics return to. Because I want to keep the community, but I want to get the community even more involved, and that's going to take some time. But I'd really like to get, I see a lot of parents at games that are screaming at officials and or looking at athletics in a different way than what I think it needs to be shown as. We just need to get back to let kids have fun.
Yeah, it's such a powerful statement. And as a parent, as I said, of 2 boys, and I was actually a former basketball official, I couldn't agree with you more, Cathy, because I think just letting the kids get back to, and I think part of the problem is, there is this pressure of, getting that scholarship for some kids, not all kids, right? But I think parents do get caught up a little bit in the success that they see, whether it's on social media or whether they read about, of these sensations. But as being involved in athletics as long as you have and had the success, this is a lot, to achieve success at a high level for a long period of time, you've got to do a lot of little things, and you've got to be consistent, and you've got to, do the right things over and over again. And not everyone does that, right? And there's a sacrifice to that. And I'm not saying that, that doesn't mean fun that's a lot of fun doing that, because with that you have success, and success can be very fun. It can be very challenging at times, but so is life, right? Like life is never always going to be on top. So if you know that going in, then that's great. I love the piece that you talked about community, and this is a great shift here. Talk a little bit about the streaming. I mean, I think, this was something like, I'll just put my 2 cents in here, and then I'm going to hand it off to you. That was the whole idea was about, like, Wendy Carfiello's parents came, and I said they came by to buy a shirt, and we were talking, and they said they couldn't make the game. And I said, "Oh, aren't you going to watch it on the stream?" And they said, "Stream? They don't stream the games." So that got us thinking, like, wow, like we have an opportunity here to help you guys out. I think it's great because it does help build community. We love it because it, maybe there's people within the community that don't know that we exist here in Seymour. We've been here almost 6 years. So that's shame on us for not doing a better job of getting into the community. But I think, I love sports and being involved in sports and a way to give back. I'm sure you want to fill the gyms or fill the ball fields, all the fields of play, I guess I would say at some point. We hope everyone can make it, but there's always something that comes up or people just can't make it. Maybe it's work or maybe it's timing. So what is it for you that we're allowed to, stream some of these basketball games? And I know we'll talk about here in a second about other sports that we'll be getting involved in.
Yeah, I mean, streaming really came around for athletics with COVID because they closed down the gyms, no fans. So we did put together a little makeshift streaming service that was just kind of thrown together so that at least our parents at home could watch some of the games. And then once the COVID restrictions kind of lightened up and we allowed fans back in, people were asking us, hey, will you go back to the streaming? And originally we're like, no, we just want people to come back in, fill the gyms, that atmosphere. And then this past year, we really looked at, because there were some people that reached out and we were trying to find a way to put that back in. With the size of our high school gym and the lack of good Wi-Fi in there, we kind of didn't entertain it in there. But we're working on it now. And we do have a huddle camera that we want to put in. But with Project Purple coming in, that kind of just saved us because it gave us an opportunity to still have our fans watch it from home and have a quality service. And being at the middle school, you can see is much easier because of the size of the gym. But it's been wonderful. And we've had a lot of parents, a lot of grandparents that have reached out and said, thank you, because it gave me an opportunity to watch my son or my grandson or my granddaughter, at an event,
Yeah.
Over this past weekend, I wasn't able to make it to the boys' first round NVLs because I had scheduled a babysitting opportunity with my grandkids. But I was able to watch it because, Waterbury streamed it. So that was, wonderful.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to it. I know, I guess this is a tease into the future here. So we will be streaming the first round CIAC game, which will take place at the middle school. Quickly, how's it been managing? I know this year with the flood that happened last year, late in the season or late in the school year, you had some damage to the court there at the high school. The team was able to get back in, I think, for the last 3 games, I think it was.
3 or 4, yeah.
3 or 4.
Yep.
So how was that from a logistics standpoint this year, trying to manage that expectation? I'm sure Coach Carfiello probably wanted to play all the games in the high school gym, but.
Yeah, I mean, it was a nightmare. It was mostly for practice schedules because we had middle school boys and girls, high school boys and girls. We had dance, we had cheer, and then we had middle school cheer. So, there's only one gym. And, middle school getting out a little bit later than the high school. So we really couldn't get in there till after 3:00 because, we didn't want to start high school practices in the middle of a middle school gym class, So there was a lot of scheduling that took place. The middle school office secretary, Kelly Riley, was phenomenal. The principal was great working with us, and we were able to kind of get it all to happen. But it was difficult, and it did mean that practice times had to be adjusted because you couldn't have a 2.5-hour practice. There just wasn't enough time to get all that in. So we made adjustments, we made it work, and thankfully we were able to get back into the high school. So and we would stay here, but really when you get to the state tournament, you typically get a lot more people to show up. So we want to make sure that we can accommodate both the home and the away team. So that's why it'll be at the middle school.
I know in years past, Coach Carfiello has talked about this advantage of the high school, but playing as much as he did this year at the middle school, maybe there'll be the advantage of playing at the middle school this year for the state tournament because they played so many games and the kids are used to it, right?
Right. It's hard when you go to the middle school because, if you haven't practiced there all year long, it's different for you too. I mean, in volleyball, we always joke we have the seventh man in our high school gym because we have this divider. And we're used to playing with that divider, but when an opponent comes in, they're not. So a lot of times the ball will hit off of that divider and, point Seymour. So there are some advantages to that home court.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're back on for the first round of the states, possibly second round. We don't want to put the cart before the horse, but we'll be back next Tuesday at the middle school for Seymour boys basketball first round in Division III. And then we are looking to do sports in the spring. I know this is something that you and I have talked about, so we're excited to kind of hopefully get a softball game, baseball, maybe some of the other sports, depending on logistics, and we've got to figure out some connectivity. But I know we're locked in for a softball game and a baseball game, and then hopefully in the fall coming back and doing volleyball there for you, and maybe some of the other sports. So we can't wait. Cathy, I really appreciate the time. Thank you for giving Project Purple the opportunity to stream Seymour High School sports this year. And we look forward to building on this to provide a resource to the community that hopefully, as you said, we can build something here with you guys and get people excited about Seymour sports.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at how many people follow UConn Huskies, so now instead of, on a night when the UConn women or UConn men aren't on, you could turn on your TV and stream a basketball game that you weren't able to go to, or, a soccer game. That would be awesome. So thank you for all that you've been able to, help support Seymour athletics.
Well, thank you for the time, and we look forward to Tuesday, first round Seymour boys basketball at home in Division III basketball state tournament. Thanks, Cathy.
Sounds good. Go Cats.